the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings, I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -250177.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about mission readiness and how that relates to Vulcan logic. Now, before we get to any of that and explain what that means, let us first go through who we are and why we're here. So, first of all, we record these sessions every Tuesday at 12:30 South African Standard Time. So if you are an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you can join us live in Discord to participate in the chat. You can ask me questions and you can log mission attendance, which is important for advancement opportunities. Everybody else, so whether you're a Dauntless Reserve or just a civilian, you're welcome to watch the live stream on YouTube. Or if you're not available at that time, which is admittedly an awkward time, you're welcome to watch it back later, either on YouTube or on Facebook. It'll be uploaded to our Facebook page in a couple of hours. So if you have a question or a comment, please remember to @tag me in the chat. So this is active duty Dauntless crew members who are present for the mission here in the Dauntless Discord server. @tag me in the chat with your question or comment so that I can find it when I get to the Q&A section at the end. I'm going to scroll back up through and look through the questions, but there's often a lively chat and not all of it is directed at me. So to make sure that I find your comment, please @tag me so that it's highlighted on my screen. And if you're watching this later, please feel free to leave a comment wherever you find the video in the comment section below. You can send me a private message somewhere, Discord, YouTube, Facebook, wherever. I'll do my best to address your comment or question there and then, or you can even suggest it as a topic for a future video if you like, which would be nice. Next up, who are we and why are we here? So I am the Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and the Dauntless is a future-focused action and advocacy group that is, at its core, a Star Trek fan club. Dauntless is a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association, Incorporated, which is the world's largest fan-run Star Trek fan association. SFI, or Starfleet International, uses the metaphor of a starship to organize its various chapters around the world. Chapters are local members of groups and cities, dozens of cities around the world, hundreds of cities around the world. But it's just a metaphor. It's not an actual starship. Instead, it's a community of like-minded people who promote Star Trek both as a form of entertainment and as a vision for the future, while taking action towards that future. The Dauntless's mission is to promote the values and philosophy of Star Trek, to provide a space for its fans to connect and to engage in activities that promote those values. The Dauntless itself is based in Cape Town, South Africa, but we have crew members in cities around the world. Let me clarify one of those points now when we're talking about our mission, which is relevant to today's topic. So our mission overall, our mission statement, is to bring the message of Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of humankind to the people of Africa and the Middle East. Who's Gene Roddenberry? He's this guy. He's the guy who created Star Trek originally. Now, many people have worked on the Star Trek franchise over the decades, but more than half a century at this point. But Gene Roddenberry is the one who got the ball rolling originally, and he is the one we thank for the original concept that has blossomed into what we know as Star Trek today. And one of the things about Star Trek that he envisioned, or that he encoded into the original concept, was that he had this vision for a future of humankind in which all of the major problems that plague us today have been solved. Crime, poverty, war, disease, all that kind of thing has been largely, if not entirely, eradicated on Earth, if not in the rest of the galaxy. And he depicted this optimistic future and also laid some breadcrumbs on the path of how we could arrive at an optimistic future like this through things like scientific and technological development, economic revolution, revolution is not the right word, evolution, economic evolution, and also cultural development over time. And we, as a future-focused action and advocacy group, we want to advocate that we move society towards that optimistic future. And we try to take actions and encourage other people to take actions that would help to shift that needle, to move us towards an optimistic future. One of the ways in which we do that is through a practice that we call mission readiness. Mission readiness is all about self-improvement. So we look to Star Trek as inspiration for how we can make ourselves better, more capable, stronger, fitter, faster, smarter, better at solving problems. And the more capable we are, the more resilient, the more resourceful we are as individuals, the more we can contribute towards that project, the more we can contribute to society to help make things better for everybody. And that is clarified here in our standing order number 2, which is to encourage initiatives to help bring about the future envisioned in Star Trek. And 2A is we work to better ourselves mentally and physically. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, why we're dealing with Vulcan logic and Stoicism. This is a video that's long promised. I've been promising this for months, and I've finally gotten around to producing today's video. So let me transition back to just me, because I'm not going to be using a lot of slides for this one. So first of all, let's talk about why mission readiness or comprehensive self-improvement matters. Why is it important? Now we break it up into 3 kind of legs. They are not different, they're not separate, but it's helpful to think of them as being distinct from one another, one of which is physical development. So why do we do that? Well, we want to improve our stamina and our health. So prioritizing physical health increases endurance and strength, ensuring that personnel, that's us, Starfleet officers, can handle demanding tasks and stressful situations with energy and resilience. And it's also about stress reduction and stress management. Regular exercise and proper nutrition helps to regulate stress hormones and improve your mood, which leads to a clearer mind during critical moments. The second leg is intellectual development, or mental, as I like to say. Enhanced problem solving is what we're going for there. And so intellectual growth through continuous learning and critical thinking enables you to analyze complex scenarios, increasingly complex scenarios, anticipate challenges, and develop innovative solutions. It helps boost your creativity. It also makes you more adaptable. A sharp intellect allows for quicker adaptation to new information and unexpected situations, a vital trait in dynamic operational environments like that of being a Starfleet officer. And then the third leg is emotional development. So why does that matter? Emotional regulation means developing emotional intelligence. I don't really like that term, but it's fairly conventional, so I'll just use it. Developing emotional intelligence helps to manage stress and to maintain composure under pressure. Again, managing stress. So you see how those 2 things are the same. Physical and emotional are not separate from one another. They are the same, but it's helpful to think of them as being distinct. Helps to manage stress and maintain composure under pressure. And this is especially important for mission-critical decisions where clear-headedness is essential. Also helps with resilience and morale. So a strong emotional foundation builds resilience, emotional resilience, allowing individuals to recover from setbacks, to support their teammates, and to maintain high morale during extended missions. All of those kinds of things are quite important. So integration with mission readiness. How are those things part of our mission readiness philosophy? So for a Starfleet officer who is committed to self-improvement, this multidimensional developmental model, that's a good phrase. I must try and remember that in future. Multidimensional developmental model leads to being a more agile, capable, and united team. Each domain reinforces the others. Physical fitness fuels mental clarity, intellectual rigor promotes better decision-making, emotional balance helps to sustain physical and mental endurance, and so on. This interconnected approach creates a foundation for robust mission readiness, ensuring that every team member is equipped to perform at their best, even at their most challenging circumstances. So let's talk about today's topic, which is specifically, well, to start off with, is Vulcan logic. What is Vulcan logic? So if you've spent any time watching Star Trek at all, you will have no doubt come across the Vulcans, who are one of the alien races in the Star Trek franchise. You'll recognize them as the ones with the pointy ears. Now, they are very similar to humans in a lot of ways, but they are distinct in a couple of ways that are quite important. One of the ways that they are distinct is that they have what we would describe as extreme emotional reactions. They have very, very volatile emotions. And so what they do as a cultural practice, as a social norm among Vulcans, is that they practice a discipline which we simply call Vulcan logic, which allows them to constrain and manage those very erratic emotions using logical deduction and reasoning, and imposing reason on emotion. So the result is that Vulcans that we see on screen, typically 99% of the time, are virtually emotionless because they are so practiced and so skilled at managing their emotions that you almost wouldn't be able to tell that they had any emotions at all. Some of them will even deny having emotions at all. We know that that's not true. They do have them. They just suppress them. And this Vulcan logic was, as far as we can tell from the Star Trek universe. So again, we're talking about a fictional universe here. We know that the Vulcans are not real, but we're suspending disbelief while we have this conversation. Within the Star Trek universe, the person who's generally regarded as being the founder of Vulcan logic is a man named Surak, who lived in about the 4th or 5th century our time, I think, if I remember the dating correctly. We do know that the practice of Vulcan logic predated Surak by at least 1,000 years, but he was the one who codified the Vulcan logic as we know it now. He, as far as we can tell, is the one who created the Kolinar ritual, which we'll talk about in a moment, and he is generally regarded as being the founder of Vulcan civilization, which happened sort of in the early 1st millennium CE. So Surak, his teachings form the cornerstone of Vulcan philosophy. So even though he didn't invent it, he did reinterpret it, he codified it, and he is, again, regarded as the father of Vulcan philosophy. And it's a doctrine that champions reason, logical analysis, and the suppression of destructive emotions. In fact, pretty much all emotions, because most Vulcans regard emotion at all as being destructive, but especially the emotions that are unambiguously destructive. His ideals laid the groundwork for what is often simply referred to as Vulcan logic. We don't have another name for it. Some scholars refer to it as Surakism, but that's not a commonly used term. In the Star Trek universe, it's only ever referred to as Vulcan logic, which is a system that values calm deliberation and controlled emotional expression over impulsive reactions. Surak, again, who lived many, many centuries ago, taught that embracing logic not only promotes peace and stability, but it also leads to a more enlightened and purposeful existence. Over time, those teachings became deeply embedded in Vulcan society, serving as a guide for everything from personal behavior to conflict resolution. However, like many philosophical traditions, these ideals have been interpreted and reinterpreted throughout Vulcan history. We can see in the first couple of seasons of Star Trek Enterprise, for example, which chronologically is among the earliest episodes in the Star Trek canon, that the common interpretation of a lot of Vulcan logic at that time differs significantly from versions of Vulcan logic we see later in the series. So Spock, living in the 23rd century, has quite a different interpretation of Vulcan logic from T'Pol, who serves on the Enterprise. So this, as with most philosophical traditions, they are not fixed, they're not static, they do evolve and develop over time. And we see some events that happen in Enterprise Season 4, which can inform how exactly that kind of transition could have happened. Now, I mentioned a moment ago the Kolinar. So one such interpretation is the Kolinar. So that is a discipline that represents the extreme of Surak's teachings. The Kolinar is the deliberate and rigorous process by which a Vulcan seeks to purge all vestiges of emotion, thereby achieving a state of absolute logical purity. You can see the ideological underpinning behind here. Vulcans perceive emotionlessness as being pure, and emotions as sort of a contamination on your being, on your soul. Soul, by the way, is not a term that we use metaphorically when we're talking about Vulcans, although humans don't have a soul. That's not really a thing. Vulcans do. They have a transmissible portion of their psyche that can be transmitted from one person to another, which is in a very real sense a soul, again, within the context of the fictional universe. It's a commitment that is highly esteemed as the pinnacle of Vulcan self-control, yet it's important to note that it's encouraged rather than mandatory. So the Kolinar isn't something that's expected of everybody. It's encouraged. It's something you should try. You should seek it out at some point if you can. But it's not expected of every single person. So it's somewhat comparable to the Hajj that present-day Muslims experience. Every Muslim is encouraged to make the pilgrimage to Mecca at one point in their life. It's kind of seen as a thing that you have to do. With Vulcans, the Kolinar is strongly encouraged, but it's not mandatory. It's not expected of everybody, but it is cool if you do it, and you should try. Most Vulcans strive rather for a balance where they maintain enough emotional reserve to maintain empathetic and connected to each other, sort of in a social way, while still adhering to a rational approach to life. So we see this in Vulcans like Tuvok, for example. He's quite good at striking a balance between his inherent emotionality and his Vulcan logical ethics, while still adhering to, So Kolinar then stands as a radical, almost ascetic pursuit, a path taken by those who believe that the ultimate expression of Vulcan logic requires the complete elimination of emotional interference. Now, again, this is a somewhat mainstream view among Vulcans, at least from the 23rd century onwards, that Kolinar is something that should be sought out. Pardon me, there's a fly buzzing around my face. But not everybody is expected to live that way. Not everybody is expected to do it. And even an individual, somebody like like Tuvok, or even like Spock, both of whom sought out the Kolinar early in their lives, both matured later in their lives to accept a more balanced approach to their life, sort of living by the dictates of Vulcan logic, while also accepting that some measure of emotionality is not entirely without utility. Pardon me, this fly. So in stark contrast to the pursuits of the Kolinar is the ideology embraced by the Vitoshkatur, which is literally translated as the purified. It's interesting that that word means the purified, because remember, the Vulcans consider the purging of all emotion to be a state of purity, but the Vitoshkatur don't think that way. This sect, which is famously associated with figures like Sybok, Spock's half-brother, offers a markedly different interpretation of Surak's legacy. While traditional Vulcan teachings advocate for the suppression of emotion to achieve clarity and logic, the Vitoshkatur argue that completely denying one's emotional nature can be counterproductive. Sybok, in particular, rejected the rigid emotionless ideal of Vulcan society, choosing instead to embrace emotions as an essential part of Vulcan experience. We see that happen in Star Trek V, although Sybok does make an appearance earlier in the chronological sequence. The bulk of his story happens then. So the Vitoshkatur still think of themselves as being adherents of Surak's teachings. They just have a very different interpretation. They're not just working to achieve a balance between logic and emotionality. They choose to, at least based on what we've seen, fully indulge in their emotions. And that is, that's what makes them unpopular among other Vulcans. That's why they don't get invited to the good parties. He believed, so he being Sybok, believed that emotions add depth, meaning, and even moral insight to life, qualities that are essential for truly understanding oneself and the universe. This more holistic approach suggests that the rejection of emotion isn't the only path to enlightenment, rather that there can be a productive interplay between emotion and logic. Now, there is, as I mentioned, a tension between these extremes. The differing paths of the Kolinar and the Vitoshkatur underscore an enduring debate within Vulcan culture. Is the total suppression of emotion the highest form of discipline, or does a tempered acceptance of emotional experience enrich one's life? The Kolinar represents a commitment to absolute logical purity, again, purity, a demanding standard that not all Vulcans are expected to meet. But in contrast, the Vitoshkatur's philosophy, as exemplified by Sybok and others, champions the idea that emotion, when understood and integrated, can enhance rather than detract from rational thought and ethical behavior. Now, we as humans, from our human point of view, we tend to think of the Vitoshkatur as being probably a more optimal strategy than the Kolinar, if we see these as two sort of ideological competitors. But I want to pause at this moment and remind us that Vulcans are not humans. They have different neurological architecture. They have a different cultural history, and their experience is not our experience. Although they are like humans in a lot of ways, they are not us. So when they think that managing emotions, and when I say they, I mean the vast majority of Vulcans think that managing emotions to the point of almost an extreme is probably a good thing, and that only a small minority of them think that embracing emotion is a good thing. That should tell you a lot more about their neural architecture and their cultural norms than it does about ours. Ours would be quite different. But in essence, these divergent interpretations, which is Surak's teachings, illustrate that even within a culture as rigorously logical as the Vulcans, there is some room for debate, adaptation, and personal choice. While some pursue the austere path of the Kolinar, others find value in a more balanced approach, proving that the legacy of Surak is as dynamic and multifaceted as the Vulcans themselves. But it is important to remember that the Vatashka tour are treated as heretics. They're criminalized. They are persecuted by mainstream Vulcans, even as late as the 23rd century. We don't really know what happens to them past the events of Star Trek V. They aren't really mentioned again, but it's likely to assume that that persecution continues, either that they remain underground and secret, or that they are completely eradicated at that point. But okay, that's enough Vulcan logic for now. Let's look at something a bit more human, a little closer to home. And that is what is probably the closest thing to Vulcan logic that we have in our philosophical canon here on Earth, and that is Stoic philosophy. So what is Stoic philosophy? So before I do answer that question, let me have a sip of my beverage. There we go. All right, so Stoicism is a practical philosophy that teaches you how to live a good and resilient life by cultivating virtue. Virtue is quite an important word there. It's probably as important to Stoicism as purity is to Vulcan logic. So virtue is very important. It was founded around 300 BCE by Zeno of Citium in Athens, specifically at the painted porch, or the Stoa Poikile. My Greek is not very good, where he and his early followers gathered to discuss ideas. At its core, Stoicism holds that virtue, which comprises of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, is the only true good. So virtue for a Stoic is probably equivalent to the word logic for a Vulcan. While external things like wealth, health, and pleasure are indifference, which is to say that they don't determine our inner well-being, which is not to say that they're bad, just that they don't matter as far as our inner well-being is concerned. It's those things, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Those are the things, according to the Stoics, that make a real difference to our inner lives. One of its most famous teachings is the dichotomy of control, which is distinguishing between what we can change, our thoughts, our actions, and our responses, and what lies beyond our control, which is external events, and so that we can focus on nurturing our own character and rationality. Over time, Stoicism was developed and systematized by thinkers like Cleanthes, and especially by Chrysippus, again, Greek philosophers, ancient world, who set the foundations for its ethical, logical, and naturalistic or physical doctrines. It later flourished in classical Rome with prominent adherents like Seneca, Epictetus, and of course Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote himself a lot of the most popular writings on the topic of Stoicism. And his personal reflections and works like the Meditations provide a window into applying Stoic ideas amid life's challenges. So if you think about Marcus Aurelius, while he was out in the battlefield leading his legions, he was penning his thoughts on Stoicism. So this is not just an abstract philosophy by somebody sitting around gazing at his navel. This was a guy who was out in the field, living a hard life, had important things to do, world-changing things, at least within his context. And he was applying this philosophy to his day-to-day operations. So he's, in my opinion, Marcus Aurelius is probably a person worth listening to. Early Christianity, which of course flourished in the Roman Empire, found inspiration in Stoicism as well. Many early Christian writers saw common ground in the Stoic emphasis on inner virtue, self-discipline, and the idea of universal logos, which is divine reason, sort of, I suppose you could think of it as an objective reality, I suppose, that permeates all of nature, and that these ideas influenced how early Christians understood ethics, personal transformation, and even the concept of community, which are ideas that later helped to shape Christian moral teachings and contributed to a broader cultural dialogue in the Greco-Roman world. Today, elements of Stoic thought can be seen not only in the ethical reflections of Christian theology, but also in modern practices like cognitive behavioral therapy, which echoes the Stoic insight that our judgments, not the external events themselves, determine our emotional well-being. In summary, Stoicism is both an ancient and enduring system of thought that has helped to shape moral and ethical ideas from early Christianity to modern self-improvement techniques. It encourages a life focused on personal responsibility, clarity of mind, and the pursuit of inner virtue. Personal responsibility, of course, is a thing that we talk about a lot here in the briefing with the Admiral when we're talking about mission readiness. It's a value that we as Starfleet officers hold very dear. Clarity of mind and the pursuit of inner virtue would definitely be complementary to that. So let's break down what the core tenets of Stoic philosophy are. So firstly, virtue is the only true good. So the Stoics believe that living virtuously through, again, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance is both necessary and sufficient for achieving true happiness. So that's all you really need, but you do need all of those things. Other things in life, again, wealth, health, I suppose, just about anything else you can think of, might make things nice, might make things more comfortable and pleasant, but really those things are not going to make you happy. They're not going to give you a fulfilling life. What will give you fulfillment is wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, at least according to the Stoics. Then there's, again, the dichotomy of control. So focusing your energy on what you can change, which is your thoughts, your actions, and your judgments, and accept what lies beyond your control. If you can't control it, you can't control it. Next is to live in accordance with nature. And they clarify this as saying you align your life with the natural order and reason, or which is, again, the universal logos, the objective reality that governs the world. And this is an interesting one that I've grappled with to some extent. Like, how do we think of living in accordance with nature when we live in a techno-utopia here in the 21st century? And I would interpret this as to say something like living your life in a way that consumes as little as is necessary of the world around you. If you are making as small a footprint, let's think of in terms of carbon usage. Carbon footprint is a buzzword that people throw around these days. Keeping your carbon footprint as small as possible, or as small as necessary, let's say, is a rational way of living. That is living in accordance with nature. You're taking from nature only what you need to survive and to be comfortable. Right? Taking excess from nature is not beneficial to you. It's not beneficial to nature. It doesn't help. So living in accordance with nature, taking only what you need, that makes sense to me, is at least in terms of living an ethical and wise existence. Then here we get to the similarity with Vulcan philosophy. So rationality over emotion. Emotions, according to the Stoics, arise from faulty judgments. By using reason and self-discipline, you can master destructive passions and achieve inner tranquility. There's a lot in that one, and we'll unpack that as we come. But that's the key joining point between Stoic philosophy and Vulcan logic, is rationality taking precedence over emotion. Then we have the universal brotherhood. So all human beings are connected as part of a single community, and we should treat others with fairness and respect. This is something that's very interesting coming from somebody like Marcus Aurelius, who, as I said, was an emperor of the Roman Empire. He was writing from the front lines of multiple campaigns of conquest that he commanded. How do you rationalize conquering people who are your enemies if we are part of the single community? And sure, okay, maybe we don't have time to go into a lot of detail about that one. Let's just leave it as is, but it's something to ponder. The next is acceptance of fate, or amor fati, as they would say in Latin, which is to embrace life's events, both good and bad, as part of the natural order, learning and growing from every experience. Part of the natural order means that that's just how the universe is. The universe will unfold as the universe unfolds, and that's how it is. We can learn and grow from it, or we can rage against it, but the universe is going to unfold how the universe is going to unfold. And then the final one, which makes it relevant to our objective here, which is self-improvement and inner resilience. So we want to cultivate a strong inner character through continual self-examination and practice, which enables you to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. Now, a lot of what we do under Mission Readiness falls directly under there. So let's compare the two. Let's compare Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy. So let's look first at the Kolinar version of Vulcan logic, which is the more or less the mainstream version. So it represents a rigorous Vulcan discipline. So the Kolinar specifically represents a rigorous Vulcan discipline to completely expunge all emotions, achieving a state of absolute logical purity. So this emphasizes total self-control and a commitment to suppress even the slightest trace of feeling, an ideal akin to the Stoic pursuit of apatheia, which is freedom from destructive passions, but taken again to an extreme. While it's considerable an honorable but optional practice, an honorable but optional personal journey rather than a mandatory path, most Vulcans pursue a balance instead of complete emotional eradication. So on this, most Vulcans, who are what you would call logical moderates, I suppose, although they think of Kolinar as being something worthwhile, they probably live a life that is more along the lines of the Vulcan, actually the Stoic philosophy of apatheia, which is freedom from destructive passions. As long as they can keep their destructive passions or their negative emotions, however you describe that, under wraps and under control, then you're doing enough. Having a little bit of emotional seeping through, just enough to foster community with your fellow Vulcan, is probably not a bad thing. Then the other extreme, we have the Vatashkatur, who embrace a nuanced emotional spectrum. I'm not sure how nuanced they are exactly, but let's go with that. So this philosophy, or this version of Vulcan logic, reflects a divergent interpretation of Sirach's teachings, where instead of absolute suppression, some Vulcans argue for the integration of emotions. So it's exemplified by figures like Sybok. Again, this philosophy contends that emotions can enrich personal experience and provide valuable insights, challenging the notion that all emotions are inherently disruptive. Now, this advocates a more flexible approach than the Kolinar, suggesting that understanding and properly channeling emotions can contribute to a more complete, balanced life. Now, that, again, sounds a little bit more Stoic, don't you think? When you're understanding and properly channeling your emotions. So you're controlling as you're managing your responses, understanding what is in your control, which is your reactions to things. So that's an interesting parallel there as well. So Stoics teach that destructive passions arise from faulty judgments, and that reason can transform these into constructive feelings, which is eupatheia, as they describe it, without necessitating their complete elimination. So we don't have to eliminate destructive passions, but we do have to manage them, regulate them, keep them under control. And the Stoic ideal is to maintain inner tranquility through self-discipline and rational thought, rational, logical, focusing on what is within one's control while still recognizing the natural human experience of emotion. So it's not about eradicating or even I suppose it is managing your emotion, but you're not eradicating emotion, you're understanding and observing your emotions, which is not dissimilar to how the Vatashkatur consider things. So let's look at some comparative insights here. So both Vulcan practice, Vulcan logic, and it's both let's start that again. So Vulcan practice in its extreme form of Kolinar and Stoic philosophy value the mastery of emotions through discipline and rationality. They aim for inner peace and moral clarity by diminishing the sway of destructive passions. The differences that are key are the rigidity of the Kolinar and the flexibility of Stoicism. Stoicism is about personal interpretation and implementation within your own life, whereas the Kolinar is imposed from the outside. When you're seeking Kolinar as a Vulcan adherent, you're not doing it entirely on your own. You're seeking the approval and guidance of Vulcan elders who have achieved Kolinar before you. So there's kind of an objective outside standard of what Kolinar is that you're working to achieve, whereas Stoicism isn't something that you're tested on. It's a personal pursuit that comes from within. Then you've got emotional value. So the Vatashkatur perspective, much like a more moderate Stoic approach, recognizes that emotions, when understood and properly channeled, can be valuable in enriching our human experience rather than simply obstacles to be eradicated. Together, these viewpoints illustrate a spectrum of approaches to managing emotion, from the extreme suppression of the Kolinar to the nuanced integration of the Vatashkatur, paralleling Stoic debates about the role of passion in the pursuit of virtue and happiness. Okay, so let's look at practical applications of Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy. I mean, it's important to understand what those philosophies look like, what they're made of, but how do we implement those in real life? They are both, the thing that both Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy have in common is that they are inherently practical and they're designed to be used day to day. They're not just about wondering about the nature of the world. It's about improving one's own life through dedicated personal practice. So here's some examples of things that we can do to enact Vulcan philosophy, Vulcan logic or Stoic philosophy, depending on how you define either. So the first one is one that I talk about all the time, and that is to engage in regular aerobic exercise. Why aerobic specifically? Because it helps to improve your cardiovascular health. Again, all kinds of exercise, and I've done multiple videos about this at this point. All kinds of exercise are important, but for the sake of this example, let's talk about aerobic exercise. So that include things like running, cycling, swimming, brisk walking, rowing. These activities help to improve cardiovascular health and enhance blood flow to the brain. So how do you do it? So you aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercises most days of the week. If you have a PerScan that can monitor your heart rate, PerScan is a wearable fitness device. I'm pointing at my sleeve, but there's one underneath there. if you have one of those, that is a device that can monitor your heart rate, it will probably have a measuring tool integrated into the heart rate monitoring system that can indicate to you when your heart rate is in a moderate intensity zone. So if your heart rate is too low, like resting heart rate for a normal human is about 70 beats per minute, that means you're not working very hard. If your heart rate is sitting at around 95 to 110, 115 beats per minute, that means you're working moderately hard. That's the kind of zone that we're talking about here. If you're pushing your heart rate over 120, that's when you're starting to work a little bit harder. You do want to be doing some of that if you can, but that's not what we mean right here. We're talking about moderate. So that's where you start. 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise most days of the week. Then you gradually increase the intensity as your fitness improves. So as you'll notice that your fitness improves because it starts to get easier. You're able to engage in that activity faster. You'll be able to cover that same distance in less time. Or if you're matching the same speed all the time, you'll notice that your heart rate doesn't climb as high as you get stronger as you're performing the same activity. So then you want to progressive overload. You want to step up the difficulty, increase the distance, maybe do 2 laps instead of 1, increase the speed requirements, that kind of thing. Then you want to consider scheduling exercise sessions as fixed appointments in your daily routine to build consistency. So this is about that, not having to engage your anterior cingulate cortex every time you want to go to exercise. You just put it in your diary and it's a thing that you do every second day or whatever it is, 3 times or 4 times a week. So that you don't have to think about it. It's just part of your life. It's part of your day. And then you don't have to decide whether or not to do it. You just do it. And the benefits there are, it strengthens the heart and circulatory system, which can support cognitive functions like improved function, again, of the anterior cingulate cortex for better mental discipline. And it regulates stress hormones like cortisol, reducing emotional discomfort and improving resilience. Now, there are a lot more benefits than that, but those are just the ones that are specifically relevant to today's discussion. It can actually help you be more rational. It can help you manage your own destructive passions better the fitter you become. When you're exercising, when you're making yourself exercise, especially if you're someone who doesn't enjoy it, that is exercise in itself because it's training your anterior cingulate cortex. It's getting you more emotionally resilient as you go. So you're training not only your body, you're training your mind too. All very important. Another example is to practice a daily mindfulness meditation. I was in 2 minds about including this on the list because I've experimented with this kind of thing in the past and I've had no positive results from a mindfulness meditation. I think it's kind of silly, frankly. But that said, a lot of people whose opinions I value greatly disagree with me on that point. They claim to find great benefit in practicing a daily mindfulness meditation. So I acknowledge that my results might not be typical of everybody, so I include it on the list for your information as something that you can try that might work for you. I don't endorse it because I can't do so with the conscience of my own experience because, again, my experience doesn't reflect what other people's does in this area. But like I said, plenty of very intelligent and well-informed people whom I respect advocate for this kind of thing. So I will relay it to you. What does that mean? So mindfulness meditation involves setting aside time to focus on your breath, your bodily sensations, or a simple mantra with the aim of cultivating present moment awareness and reducing reactive emotional responses. How do you do that? Well, you find a comfortable space where you won't be disturbed. You sit or you lie down in a relaxed position and set a timer on your phone or your PerScan for 10 to 20 minutes. And while you're doing that, you focus on your breath. And if your mind wanders, you gently guide your attention back without judgment. You don't judge yourself. You don't castigate yourself for doing it. You just notice that it's happening and then guide it back. And if you struggle with that, you can use, there are apps and recordings, podcasts on Spotify, things like that you can find that can help you acclimate to the practice. So if you're not sure about how to do it, there are tools you can find that will guide you through it. And what does it get you? What's it for? So it increases your self-awareness and your mental clarity. It activates brain areas that help to manage stress, including the anterior cingulate cortex, which is a very important brain area in this discussion. And it helps to manage your cortisol levels, which promotes a calmer state of mind. Now, again, I haven't found it very useful at all, but lots of people do. So wouldn't hurt to give it a try. It doesn't cost you anything. See how it feels. Another one, which again, I don't do nearly as often as I think we should, but I have practiced this from time to time in my life, and I found it beneficial when I have, and that is to maintain a consistent journaling routine. What is journaling? So, journaling is a reflective practice where you regularly write about your thoughts, your feelings, and your experiences, and it helps to track your emotional patterns and fosters your clarity in decision making. Now, this is actually something that we see in Star Trek. Starfleet encourages every, now this is the fictional Starfleet, that is, encourages every Starfleet officer to keep a daily log of their experiences. Those logs are kept by Starfleet for the official record, and senior officers, like the commanding officer, will have a professional log, a ship's log of what happens to the ship on that day, and then a personal log, which is their personal reflections and experiences. And we've heard on multiple occasions that every Starfleet officer is encouraged to keep a log for themselves. Not everybody does. Not everybody practices this, at least not with equal levels of diligence. Not everybody chooses to include every detail of their day in their log. But we see a lot of people engaging in this kind of thing, and it seems to be something that is beneficial for them. So how do you do this? Well, there are a bunch of ways. You can, firstly, you need to dedicate a specific time each day, like the first thing in the morning when you're waking up and having your coffee, or perhaps before bed. You set aside a few minutes every day for journaling. And you can use any number of tools. You can use a physical pen and paper notebook, or you can use an app on your pad or your desktop, your workstation, to record your reflections without self-censorship. So that's quite an important part. You need to be able to express yourself without feeling judged, because you need to be able to trust that nobody's going to read this but you. So if you are using an app on your phone, try find a dedicated journaling app as opposed to just using a note or a document on your phone, because those are not necessarily secure. You want to find something that is secure. And if you do have a pen and paper notebook, keep it locked in a drawer so that family members or guests in your home don't accidentally stumble across it and page through it wondering what's in there. Make sure that it's something that's secure. And then you consider, if you're struggling to figure out what to write, you can use prompts for yourself, like we would use for AI. So prompt yourself by starting off with, what did I learn today? Or how did I react to challenges and why? And that kind of thing to guide your entries if you're having trouble. You can even use AI tools to help you with this kind of thing. Yeah, so what are the benefits? Why would you do that? So it enhances your self-reflection and emotional regulation in, I think, a lot of the same ways that mindfulness techniques encourage you to do. You're pushing yourself to think back through your days, not only your experiences, but also your emotional responses to those experiences. It helps you to identify recurring thought patterns and areas for growth, especially if you're reviewing your journal from time to time, and you can go back and see how you responded emotionally to situations in the past and compare that to your response to similar situations in the present. And you can start to pick out emotional trends, and you can see what areas in your mind might need some improvement. And then it provides a written record to monitor your progress and your improvements over time. While you're at it, wouldn't hurt to keep a bunch of other information in there, things like your weight progress, your nutritional log, your how your workouts are going. I mean, all those kinds of bits of personal information are useful to look back on over time. And if you've got it in some kind of a searchable place, that wouldn't be the worst thing, especially if you're switching from one app to another, as most of us do from time to time. Another example is to use structured decision-making frameworks, specifically as Stoicism suggests, the dichotomy of control. So what does that mean? So this practice involves consciously separating aspects of a situation into what you can control, and so that's things like your own thoughts, your decisions, your actions, and what lies outside of your control. So that's external events, other people's responses, etc. So if you are faced with a situation in which you are required to make a decision, or you have to evaluate your response, you have to make a measured response, think about it on those terms. Have two columns: things that I can control, this is what is within my control in the situation, and these are the things that are not in my control in this situation. Forget about the things you can't control, because again, you can't control them, and focus all of your energy on the things that are within your control, and that can help you to divert your mental resources in the right directions. Again, how do you do that? So when you're faced with a challenge, make a 2-column list, one for controllable factors and one for uncontrollable ones. Focus your energy and efforts on the controllable aspects, and revisit the list periodically. So if it's the kind of situation where you have to face it over time, go back to that list, keep it, and assess the changes and reinforce the habit of focusing on what you can influence. So it's easy to get bogged down if you're working on a project at work or something like that, or you're dealing with a difficult emotional situation, some kind of family conflict or whatever. It's easy to get swept up in the emotions of the situation. But if you keep that list and you go back to it and adjust it and update it and make sure that it's relevant to your current situation, you can keep your mind focused on, again, what you can and what you can't control and where your resources should be going. So what are the benefits? So it reduces anxiety and impulsive reactions by clarifying your sphere of influence, knowing what you can do. There's no point raging against the machine. There's no point banging your fists on a wall or any number of other helpful metaphors. Use your energy where it matters. It promotes rational, well-considered responses under pressure. It strengthens personal responsibility and alignment with your core values. Another one is to incorporate controlled breathing and biofeedback techniques. So what does that mean? So controlled breathing exercises help to regulate your autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is the aspect of your nervous system that controls things that you don't have to control on purpose. So when you move your arm, you're doing that on purpose. When you speak, you're doing that on purpose, but you're not beating your heart on purpose. You're not breathing on purpose most of the time. You can take over manual control of your breath, but if you forget to breathe, you breathe anyway. That is your autonomic nervous system. That reduces stress and promotes your mental calmness. Biofeedback techniques can help provide real-time insights into your physiological state, into the state of your body. So how do you do it? So you can practice deep diaphragmatic breathing exercises such as box breathing. I'm not going to do a demonstration of box breathing, but you can find that online on YouTube. Diaphragmatic breathing means you're breathing from your diaphragm, which is low down in your abdomen, as opposed to breathing from your chest. There are various other ways that you can breathe from your shoulders or from your head or whatever. Of course, you're only breathing with your lungs, but it's about what parts of your body are flexing in response to that breath. So diaphragmatic breathing means you're breathing down into your abdominal cavity. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold again for 4 seconds. So that kind of deliberate, focused breathing where you are manually controlling your breathing as opposed to just letting your autonomic nervous system do it. You can also use, again, a pad or a per scan with guided breathing techniques and biofeedback monitor, like your heart rate or your stress levels. So you can get feedback on how that's progressing. And you can practice these techniques during stressful moments or just part of a daily routine. So if you know that if you can feel that you're getting stressed, you're facing a difficult situation, you can take a minute or so out of your day to practice these biorhythm feedback sessions, or you can just do it daily or both. So what does it do? Well, it lowers your stress and reduces your cortisol levels. It enhances your focus and emotional regulation by activating the parasympathetic nervous system. It provides immediate, practical tools to manage anxiety and maintain composure. So if you're somebody who suffers from anxiety, this is probably a very useful tool. Another way is you can prioritize quality sleep and balanced nutrition. This is less of a quick thing that you can start doing, and more kind of a structured overall approach to how you manage your life, I suppose. Adequate sleep and proper nutrition are essential for brain function and overall health. They provide the body with the resources needed to repair itself and maintain hormonal balance. So how do you do that? Well, we've spoken about nutrition to some extent already, but you establish a consistent sleep schedule by going to bed and waking up at the same time each day. Now, some people work shifts. It's not always possible to regulate your schedule in that way, but you want to regulate it as much as possible so that you're getting a regular amount of sleep and enough sleep. Now, it's not possible to say you have to get 8 hours a night or 7 hours or 9 hours a night, because not everybody is the same. Some people can manage with 3 hours of sleep a night. Some people need a solid 12. You need to figure out how much sleep you need in order to be properly rested the next day, and you need to prioritize making sure that you get enough hours of sleep. And not just enough, but also quality sleep. How do you do that? Well, you create a bedtime routine that minimizes screen time and relaxes your mind. Now, when I say minimizes screen time, I don't mean that you can't look at screens when you're going to bed, but just be mindful about how you're using the screens. One of the things that screens do is that they shine blue light into your eyes. Blue light, okay, photosensitivity is perhaps a topic for another whole episode of this webinar series. But essentially, blue light wakes you up and red light puts you to sleep. So think of the sky during the day. The sky is blue. So when your eyes detect blue, they want to wake up. It's stimulating. When the sun is low in the horizon, the sky turns red. So red light helps you to relax. So what a lot of screens do is they shove blue light into your eyes late at night, and that makes you want to wake up. There are tools that you can get to mitigate this. Most smartphones have an evening mode where it changes the colors of the screen, gives it a slight reddish tint, so you can still check your messages, you can still scroll Instagram or whatever, but you're not getting that harsh blue. There are blue blocker lenses for glasses that are available. In fact, these glasses have blue, which is why they have kind of a blue reflection to them. You can see that in the camera. Everything kind of reflects blue. It reflects the blue out of my eyes. I didn't ask for that. I didn't actually want that, but it just came with it like that. There's a lot of that kind of thing available. You can also adjust if you have smart color changing LEDs in your house, which most of us have, at least some of those these days. Set the color temperature of your lights to a reddish hue in the evening, or at least, not a bright blue one. And if you don't have those, next time your light bulbs need to be replaced, instead of buying cool white, buy warm white, or better yet, the color changing LED ones that you can adjust the color temperature based on the time of day. Those are some of the things that you can do to help make sure that you don't get too much blue light. So screen time isn't the enemy it's made out to be, but you do need to be intentional and deliberate about how you use screens late at night. All right, so reading or meditating before sleep is a good idea. So we talked about that mindfulness technique. Doing it just before you sleep is probably a good way of calming your mind and getting ready to get into a sleep routine. Reading a book is also not a terrible idea. But again, I'm not against screen time. What I like to do to relax before bed is I watch an old 1980s sitcom. I find it nostalgic and soothing, and it helps to put my mind at ease. Every night a different 1980s sitcom. Some of them are very good, some of them are terrible, but I enjoy that anyway. Focus on a balanced diet rich in fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains. Stay hydrated throughout the day. So I did a briefing recently on nutrition and how to manage your nutrition carefully. You want to make sure that you have the proper balance of macronutrients and micronutrients, especially a balance that aligns with your fitness goals. If you are working to build muscle mass, which we should all really be doing, you want to be maximizing your protein intake. Fruits and vegetables are important too because they help you get your micronutrients, which are also very important. And whole grains are beneficial because generally speaking, they have a lower glycemic index than processed grains. They also tend not to be mixed with emulsifiers, which can affect how you absorb sugars in your gut. And they also have a slightly higher fiber content, which can help to keep your gut regular, especially if you have a sensitive gut. So whole grains, not because processed grains are terrible or poison or anything, but whole grains are probably a better choice if you can choose between them. And staying hydrated is also much more important than you think. Thankfully, everybody seems to have gotten the message about hydration these days, but still not something that we should be overlooking. It's also beneficial to consider meal planning to ensure that you're consuming nutrient-dense foods regularly. So again, the tool that I use for managing my nutrition is MyFitnessPal, and I will, whenever it's practical, I'll try to plan out my meals for the entire day based on my macro and micro requirements for the day. Making sure that I'm getting enough protein, I'm getting enough carbs, enough fats, hitting my micros as well. I'll also take a multivitamin just in case, because I don't always get enough fruits and vegetables in my allotment, but a multivitamin is probably sufficient to fill in all those micronutrient gaps. I also get blood tested regularly, so if I do have any shortfalls or deficiencies, then I know that I can supplement it either by changing the profile of what I eat regularly or by supplementing it with a vitamin pill or something like that. So meal planning is a good intentional way of managing the balance of your consumption of the food that you eat and making sure that you don't go massively over your kilojoule allotment or don't underconsume protein, that kind of thing. If you're planning it all ahead, you're not waiting until you're starving to make poor decisions and then you end up buying chips instead of biltong or whatever. Benefits there is that this supports overall physical health, which in turn boosts mental clarity and emotional stability. It helps to regulate stress hormones and supports optimal brain function, so improved focus, decision-making, resilience. And it enhances energy levels and aids in recovery from physical and mental exertion. Sleep and recovery go hand in hand. If you're trying to build muscle mass, getting enough sleep and enough good quality sleep is as important as pushing heavy in the gym. Because when you're pushing heavy, that's when you're stimulating the hypertrophic response. But when you're resting, especially when you're sleeping, that's when the hypertrophy is actually happening. And if you're up and about, hypertrophy can't be happening because your nutritional resources are being diverted elsewhere. You have to be resting. And the deeper your rest, the better your hypertrophic response. So each of these practices not only strengthens the body and mind, but also reinforces the overreaching goal of building resilience, mental discipline, and the capacity to handle stress, which is an approach that aligns with both Vulcan logic and with Stoic philosophy. By implementing these steps, crew members can cultivate a robust inner foundation, enabling you to perform optimally under pressure and maintain well-being throughout challenging missions. So let's just go through the key takeaways quickly. So first, we want to embrace rational thought and self-discipline. Both Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy emphasize the importance of rational analysis and self-control to achieve inner peace and effective decision-making. When we engage in regular physical activity, participating in consistent aerobic exercise enhances cardiovascular health, supports brain function, and helps regulate stress hormones, contributing to improved mental resilience. Practicing mindfulness and meditation incorporating mindfulness and meditation techniques can foster self-awareness, enhance emotional regulation, and promote mental clarity, aligning with the principles of both philosophies. Again, your results may vary, but worth a try. You want to maintain quality sleep and balanced nutrition, which prioritizes adequate sleep and nutrition, and a nutritious diet supports overall well-being, cognitive function, and emotional stability, essential for maintaining discipline and rationality. And then we want to utilize structured decision-making frameworks. So applying methods like the dichotomy of control helps to distinguish between what can and cannot be controlled, leading to a more rational responses and reduced impulsivity. Implementing these practices can enhance mental discipline, emotional regulation, and overall well-being, aligning with the core tenets of both Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy. All right. Question and answer time. Let me go back through the questions, if there were any. Okay, let's see. All right. Commander Shamali says rowing mentioned. Yes, Commander Shamali, I know, is a rower. She enjoys rowing, so I mentioned rowing. Rowing is a great cardiovascular exercise. It helps to build muscular strength as well. At least first, you'll notice that after a while, your muscle development will start to slow down because you're just not lifting heavier and heavier weights. The neuromuscular development will adjust to that repetitive motion. So you'll get initial gains, at least visible gains, but those will plateau pretty quickly. But it's still an excellent cardiovascular exercise, especially if you're pushing yourself and trying to break through your plateaus. Commander Shamali says, I'm trying to up the speed, but I can't. I'm stuck. Cannot break 6,000 meters in 20 minutes. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's the kind of thing that happens, is you will hit plateaus, and then you have to figure out how to vary your approach to get through them. What I find when I hit plateaus is I'll switch up my routine. So So again, I'm not rowing. I'm not that kind of an athlete. But when I'm stuck on a weightlifting challenge, if I'm not able to get past a particular weight, for example, on the lat pull down machine, I'll switch to a different exercise that works the same muscle group, but from a slightly different angle, slightly different load. So maybe a forwards row or something like that. Then I can get some initial noob gains from that new exercise, which can then help me to push through that plateau on the other exercise. So after a few weeks, I'll switch back to the lat pull down again, and I'll notice that I've gotten significantly stronger in the interim. All right. Another one from Commander Shamali. I have to check out early, I'm afraid. Sorry, but have to run. Thank you for joining us, Commander. We appreciate you for being here today. I just want to also thank everyone else who's here today. So we're Colonel Hubert, we've got Master Chief Newton, Master Chief Kotzer, and Captain Van Groenen. Thank you so much for joining us here today, everybody. That seems to be all the questions. So I'm just going to, I also see that we have Captain John Hardy from the USS Essex, who's the CEO from Region 20. Welcome for joining us on YouTube. I don't always see the YouTube comments, but I see them today. So thank you for joining. Shout out to the USS Essex. All right, let me conclude with motivational statements. So embracing the principles of Vulcan logic and Stoic philosophy equips us with the clarity and resilience needed to navigate the challenges of our mission. By cultivating rational thought, self-discipline, and emotional regulation, we not only enhance our personal well-being, but also strengthen our collective efficiency. Let us integrate these timeless practices into our daily routines, ensuring that we remain steadfast and focused in the face of adversity. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.